So, good evening, everybody. Hello, if you're dialing in from anywhere else other than India. But for those who are in India, good evening. Thank you once again for joining us on a Friday evening to talk about a topic that and I say we, it's me and usually my tribe who pop up as guests on this live, believe are important for women. And today I have a very special topic and I have a very special guest. I have with me Pearl Panthaki. Pearl, welcome to the show.
Thank you so
And
much, Reka. Excited to be here.
and I'm just going to invite you. I'm not, I mean, I've said a lot about you in the post, and I'm assuming that everybody who's been reading will know who you are. So I'm going to invite you to share a little bit more about yourself so that the viewers get a sense of who you are.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you so much, Reka. So good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining in. My name is Pearl Panthaki. Three aspects I want to talk about myself. One, I consider myself a global citizen. Two, a value creator. And three, I want to talk a little bit about my personal purpose. So me being a global citizen, I have lived and worked in many different countries. And I really feel travel is the PhD to life. It broadens your horizons, you get out of your comfort zone, and you meet such different kinds of people. In terms of value creating, I really believe in that philosophy. It's something I really take to heart, both in my personal life and at work as well. And in terms of my personal purpose, well, I really want to help people reach their full potential, which is why I love my job so much. So those are just three aspects about me, Reka: being a global citizen, being a value creator, and aligning my personal purpose to the larger purpose, if you want, in life.
Thank you so much, Pearl. So, what Pearl also did not go into is the fact that she coaches people. She's a brilliant coach. She's a learning leader. She is a transformation and wellness coach. And she's also a very integral part of the Fabric at Dragonflies Everywhere. She works with our nonprofits to develop our learning and knowledge sharing program. So, and of course, she is one of my closest friends. She's an inspiration to me in terms of boundaries. And one of the reasons I thought she was the perfect person to talk about boundaries today was because in the past 2 years, I used to be somebody who had almost no boundaries. And over the past 2 years, I started my journey of building boundaries. And one of the questions that I really had to ask myself was, what did boundaries mean to me? And Pearl was an inspiration to me and that was the context for boundary setting. Now, I'm going to put a little disclaimer here. I know the title of this talk says Women, Leadership, High Value Boundaries. But I want to make it very clear that this is a conversation for everybody. You don't have to have a designation or an ambition to be a leader in the corporate world. You have to be wanting, desirous of leading a life of purpose. So whether you are a homemaker, a mom, somebody who's running a business, somebody who's working two jobs, who's pursuing a passion on the side, wherever you're at, whoever you are, whatever your purpose in life is, this is a conversation for you. And I hope, everything that Pearl has to share about her lived experience in setting boundaries and living with boundaries is going to create a lot of value for all of us. So, Pearl, I'm going to set the ball rolling by going
Okay.
down to the brass tacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Many of us, boundaries evoke many images in our heads for a
Mm.
lot of us. And for a lot of women, it's a pain point. It's
Yeah.
actually a point where women don't really want to get into. But I find that, I have observed you and I've observed that your approach to boundaries is very different. And so I'm going to start off by asking you to unpack boundaries in your dictionary for us. What is your take on boundaries? And,
Okay.
why do you feel boundaries are so essential for, say, your well being as a human?
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, great. So let me start by saying I think for me, having boundaries helps create the life that I want right here, right now. And I look
Mm,
at boundaries as this invisible force that is there to protect, guide, and help me lead a more meaningful and purposeful life.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I do that? I'm very in tune with,
Mm.
I would say, my internal compass. So I listen and feel to my gut feeling and where is that taking me? And because of that, it creates a space of abundance, of nurturing and balance. And you
Mm.
mentioned the word well-being there, Reka.
Yeah.
For me, as you know, well-being is such an integral part of my life and something I do very consciously as well.
Mm.
And when I
Mm.
talk about well-being, I think of three aspects: physical,
Yeah.
emotional, and spiritual. So for me, every day doing something physical. It could be a walk, it could be running, it could be yoga.
Mm.
And, you know, 6 months ago, I joined a women's football team. I wanted to do something in a team, something outdoors, a sport I've always watched on TV, but I'd never
Mm.
tried. And I just love it.
Mm.
In terms of emotional, what I mean by that is being very aware of
Mm.
my emotions, the
Mm.
triggers that
Mm.
can be there, and whether I'm feeling sad, angry, frustrated. Just being aware and
Mm.
owning how I'm feeling. And this is moment to moment, day after day, week after week.
Mm. Mm.
And then a spiritual boundary. For
Mm.
me, I think it's integral to have a spiritual anchor that
Yeah.
guides you during difficult
Mm.
times. And as you know, I'm part of a Buddhist practice. I've been part of a
Yeah.
Buddhist practice for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And that has helped me navigate through difficult times. So for me, boundaries was never something that I was born with it. I
Yeah.
learned to set boundaries by observing people and
Mm.
questioning, well, how are they okay saying no? And how are
Yeah.
they okay speaking up?
Yeah.
And, even, on a Friday night, I would have FOMO when someone said, right, let's go out. On the one
Yeah.
hand, I did want to go out, but on the other hand, I was like, no, I want to sit in. And I could never
Yeah.
say no, but I
Yeah.
observed people. So for me, having boundaries, it's given me permission to be vulnerable
Yeah.
and intimate with myself
Yeah.
and to be that way with others as well.
Well, that's such a powerful statement that you make about being vulnerable with yourself, because over the past 2 years, because we are very, we are in each other's lives quite a bit, and
Yeah.
we talk about a lot of stuff. And one of the things I always admire about you is that you're so clear about what you want for yourself. What I find very interesting about your approach to boundary
Mm.
is is where your focal point is. For many of us, like for me, for the longest ever, a boundary was it was a fence that kept people out. It
Yeah.
was only,
Yeah.
it represented safety for me, and that was it.
Sure. Yeah.
When I watch you, I find there is this huge element of nurture, and there is a huge
Yes.
element of, self-respect, self-esteem,
Yes. Yes.
and setting. There is this belief, you own this belief that you're here to thrive, and therefore you're doing everything you can to create the balance so you can thrive. And that's something I really like about your approach to boundaries. So as we go forward, I'm going to you know uh, probe you a little bit
Yeah, please.
and see how do you do this, because you're one of the few people I know who does this effortlessly, and I really want us to understand some of the little secrets.
I don't know about effortlessly. It requires mindfulness. It requires effort. It requires discipline. But
Yeah.
Rachel, as women, we're constantly doing.
Yeah.
There's constant tasks. There's constant chores, and we're human beings. We should
Yeah.
be being more, but we drain ourselves out. And you talked about self-respect.
Yeah.
I think it's time for women to have self-love,
Yeah.
and it's time for women to have that space where they can hold and
Yeah.
live their truth. And every day, set time for ourselves and not for others. And
Yeah.
that might sound really easy and simple to do, but to put it into practice is
Yeah.
really, really difficult for a lot of women. But I think it's about exploring choices that give one freedom and
Yeah.
flexibility.
Yeah.
And they're little things that I do, if I can just share. couple of
Right.
things that above and beyond, what I do, and very simple. So at 9 o'clock, I go on a digital detox,
Okay.
and my friends laugh at me, but it's for me that is time, that is quiet time. There's no
Yeah.
noises, there's no notifications. I switch off, and that's great. And then there are times when actually throughout the day I don't want to speak to people.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I choose not to speak to people. And
Yeah.
I also choose that I don't want to take calls late at night.
Yeah.
So I've set my boundaries that I'm happy to take calls first thing in the morning.
Hmm.
So I decline those meetings.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
worked for me, and people respect that. And I think it's only when you start taking steps to what you want, people will respect that. So
Yeah.
you are right. It's not easy, but when you take those baby steps
Yes.
and test it and try it and see how it is, you're like, oh, it's not so bad after all. A lot of it is
Yes.
in our head.
Yes, I think it's also the fact that you are very intentional about the kind of life you want for yourself on an
Yes,
everyday basis, and
yes,
you create the space. You create that space to ensure that you can live the life you want as much as possible every day. You're not waiting for it in a distant future, but it's every
absolutely.
day,
It's
right?
every day. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump into a quick, into the next question, because
Okay.
where we are going to, when you're talking about living an intentional life or designing a life that you want to live, it's not just one or two kinds of boundaries. You need to
Mm,
have a number of boundaries at micro levels, right? So
certainly.
according to you, and I know
Hmm.
you work on a lot of leadership programs for women and you
Yeah.
work with women. So I want to get what your thoughts are about the different types of boundaries that a woman needs today.
Great question. Well, I'm just going to take a step back a bit. Uh,
Sure.
you know, we have been brought up
Yes.
thinking we have to be good girls. We have to be polite. We have to keep a low profile, don't share things.
Yes.
And we've been told to, respect our elders.
Yes.
And so much of this is wired into our brain and we don't even realize it.
Hmm.
But I think for when you talk about women leaders, what is it we need to start doing?
Hmm.
We need to start changing this perspective of boundaries, of limiting us. It's not
Hmm.
a barrier.
Yeah.
It's not a barrier. We
Yeah.
have to start exploring boundaries to see how do we expand the opportunities? What
Hmm.
is out there above and beyond? And I think that's really a key starting point for women. And as women start to do that,
Hmm.
you also notice that women will start to project their confidence
Yes.
authentically and
Yeah.
assertively. Women have confidence.
Yeah.
It's not that they don't, but do they project it
Yeah.
during the meetings, during the board meetings?
Yeah.
Um, Women also need to start speaking up with clarity, being
Hmm.
self assured. And, you use this word intentional.
Hmm.
Yeah, we don't tend to speak up. And I think the way we use our language, we can
Hmm.
use language that diminishes our value. So, for example, if we say, well, I think, or I hope that makes sense, or, oh, sorry for the delay, or my classic one, what I hear people say is, this is a gentle reminder. What is a gentle reminder?
So
you know,
basically, what you're saying is whatever the kind of boundaries are, you need to have clarity
you
and you
need
need to
to
have
have clarity.
confidence and you need to
Yes,
you basically decide what are the boundaries you need, and that comes from a
absolutely.
space of extreme clarity, and that needs to show up in your communications. Am I getting that
That
right?
absolutely the way you think, the way you speak, the
Okay.
tone of voice you use. Absolutely,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Okay. So so it would mean that, wherever you need that space, wherever you need to create that, that little space for yourself to thrive, be it spiritual, be it physical, maybe it's a hobby, maybe
Yeah,
it's your me time, whatever else it is, it's
correct.
on you to decide what it is, and then for you to come up with to basically own the boundaries in a way, in your way.
Absolutely. In your own way. And like I said,
Right.
because we're so busy, 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 we don't take the time
Hmm.
to take a step back, to
Hmm.
introspect. And
Hmm.
we operate from a space of fear, worry, anxiety, and that anchors us. Whereas if we
Yeah.
could let go and
Hmm.
embrace fear, embrace worry, and say, what is it I'm worried about? And when we go towards that, we'll feel, what if I what if I don't succeed? What happens
Yeah.
if this person thinks I'm a fool? What happens if I don't say the right thing? Well, we've all made mistakes. And there's no such thing as failure. It's only a
Yeah.
learning. And taking
Yeah.
those baby steps towards working to setting up those boundaries that work for yourself. Because
Hmm.
what works for me may not work for you or for someone else.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I like the fact that you have brought in the element of fear
Mm,
because when I work with women, I notice there are two recurring themes that pop up in terms of emotions.
mm,
One is fear, and the second is guilt when it comes to
yes,
boundaries, right?
so much.
And there's an element of shame also in certain
Totally.
roles.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
I find that the fear, the anxiety, and this the sense of guilt is so deep in women
Yes.
that they are willing to drain themselves rather and give up that space that they want in their hearts, but they're not really claiming for themselves. But they don't do it because of this anxiety.
We
Or
can, it's so right. We're creatures of habit. And even if those patterns are not good for us, we're comfortable within those
yeah,
patterns. So
yeah,
to recognize fear, to
yeah, yeah,
accept that, or to
yeah,
vocalize, I'm worried, I'm scared. That takes a
yeah,
lot. That takes a lot to even bring that up to the surface. And that's why when we talk about boundaries, it's
mm,
really a journey of going within. And I feel setting up boundaries is wasn't something I did by myself.
yeah,
There were people who helped me along the way. There were
mm,
conversations that
yeah,
I've had with people. There were books that
yeah,
I read. There were training courses that I went on. But
mm,
every day is a new day. We don't just have to wait for January 1st. Every day
absolutely
is New Year's Day, and it's a fresh start. And
right.
it's a way to recharge and reset ourselves and say, does this work for me? Am I
Yeah.
happy? Am I content? Am I going towards a life that I truly want? Or am I leading a life just because that's what's there in front of me and what I know?
Absolutely. So tell me, Pearl, I mean, this is just because we are women and we have experienced it ourselves.
Mm,
Why do you think this anxiety exists? Like, why, because a lot of times there is a resistance to even taking that step back and thinking.
absolutely.
There is almost a sense of helplessness. It's a learned
Yeah.
helplessness. I
Yeah.
can't do this. I have no
Yes.
choice. I
Yeah.
want it, but I cannot do it. And it
Yeah.
all comes back again to your fear and your guilt, right?
Correct.
So, I mean, this is just. I want to pick your brains here. Why do you think this anxiety is so deeply embedded, and why do you think women hold on to this fear? Why do they cling on to this fear, and which is limiting, even though they know it's limiting?
Rika, think about it. Like I said, from childhood, we've been conditioned.
Hmm.
And there are certain expectations of what society wants. And to set your boundaries, you also need to know your values.
Hmm.
And when it comes to values,
Hmm.
many people don't know their own values. They've taken values from communities, from
Yeah.
societies, from their religion, and they've
Yeah.
just adopted it. This is how we should live. And
Exactly.
I don't know about you, but I never talked about fear, worry, anxiety with my parents. It was
Yeah.
not something we talked about openly in
Yeah.
my family.
Yeah.
But it was only through my journey, and actually when I left home, and I haven't lived home since I was 18, that
Hmm.
I realized, oh wow, I'm by myself. This
Yes.
is my life. I have to make those choices, which was both
Yes.
exciting and I
Yes.
was worried. And that's when I
Yes.
started to embrace and to
Yeah.
own this idea of having fear. And fear can sometimes be good for us. It
Yes.
propels us to get out of our comfort zone in
Yes.
moderation, but too much fear also makes us worried. And that's when the tension anxiety exists as well.
Yeah. So, it's very interesting that you posed the question about, I don't know about you, whether I spoke about anxiety with my family, but I did not until we've had conversations about fear, but
Mm,
did we really talk about boundaries? We never really talked about
no,
fear and anxiety in the context of
no.
boundaries. And I also kind of noticed that for a lot of women, I mean, although you and I are saying, yes, you need to take a step back and claim your space,
Mm,
we fortunately or unfortunately do live in social units where the landscape does not give you that space. So
absolutely.
you have to actually fight very ferociously.
You have to, every day is a struggle. It's
Yes,
consistent. That's why that discipline, that spirit of never giving
yes,
up and having that clear, I would say, personal purpose. What is it that I want from my life, not what
yeah,
society expects? And it goes back to, that definition of success for your life. Are
yeah,
you defining success what others think? Or is it what
exactly.
you want and what you think and celebrating those milestones along the way?
Yes, I think that you hit the nail on the head there, as in how do you define success for yourself and whose life are you
Absolutely.
really living?
Whose
Because
life you lead? Yes,
yeah, because it's so easy for us to replicate. You and I know this. We talk about this pretty often that whose narrative is running in our heads, whose
absolutely, absolutely. And
whose
to
voice.
break those narrative and to reduce the volume of those certain voices.
Exactly, right? So yeah, I think that's a, I think that's a really great, I think we're in a great space in the conversation because we've come to this point of really saying, okay, this is what it is. And we know it's not easy,
It's
but
not easy. It's a journey. And I think with boundaries, you have to keep it fluid. It's not
yes,
that I've set my boundaries and be rigid with it. I think work within your boundaries. Do you need to be flexible? Absolutely, you do. And just keep seeing, does it work for me? Am I
you know,
happy? Am I content?
I like what you're saying because there's something that's just struck me as you're talking
Mm,
that a lot of us deprioritize ourselves. We
very much so.
deprioritize our happiness. And
Absolutely.
the problem with deprioritizing our happiness and our needs is we are then in a state of, we are in a state of anxiety, we are in a state of
Yes.
frustration, and we are
Uh,
repressing our anger, which means we show up in all our relationships and the world with the sense of repressed anger, and that will project on. So if you want to, be graceful, even to set boundaries, even if you're setting it with, you need to set it with grace. I think we
yeah,
have to, what you pointed out is very right. We have to, has to come from a space of love inside of us for
totally.
us, rather than
Absolutely.
seeing it as a, a challenge and a problem. I like,
Abs-
yeah,
yeah, and these are things that we're not taught at school, is it, Reka? We're
no,
not taught these things at school, at college. This idea of self-love,
yeah,
self-respect, boundaries. I mean, I
yeah,
wish I had known this in my teenage, during my teenage years.
yes,
But it's never too late. And
I,
like I said, it's never too late. It's a journey, and you can start tomorrow by just trying something out, working it out, being disciplined, and
yeah.
seeing, does that hold true for me? Does this work for me?
Yes, absolutely. So let's, so we've been talking about boundaries, and I think so far what we've been talking about is healthy boundaries,
Yes,
so that we create space for ourselves as a certain amount of thriving.
yes,
But when we talk about leadership, we need to have more than healthy boundaries. It has
yeah,
to go way beyond safety and maintenance of the spaces. It really has to go to, it has to be about feeding you and nurturing you as a leader so that you can show up with leadership, right?
absolutely.
So what according to you are high value boundaries? And I know high value is not a familiar phrase for many of us. Incidentally, I have to tell you, high value is something that is used in the context of relationships for women. When they say, how do you be a high value woman?
Yeah,
And it's all about knowing your value, owning your value, and
yeah,
owning it with a lot of grace, right?
absolutely. Yeah,
I think it's a leadership essential. And I think that's what we see with a lot of men who are in the positions of leadership.
yeah.
So, why, what do you think about high value boundaries and why do you think they're so essential for leaders?
I think in today's world where
Mhm.
we're living with such ambiguity, and such
Mm,
complexity, and things are very dynamic and fast paced.
mm, mm.
I think high value boundaries, like you rightly said, are knowing and owning your
Yeah.
values, who you are as an individual. And when you know your values,
Mm,
how do you show your values being self assured, confident? You're not a pushover.
yeah.
And this is how you communicate, this is how you behave. People observe it. And how do you bring your leadership to the table and
Absolutely.
showing what is unique to you?
Yeah.
And I think everyone has a gift that they are born with.
Yeah.
How is that developed? How is that nurtured? I said at the beginning, my personal purpose is to help everyone live to the occasion of showing their personal
Mm,
potential,
mm,
myself included. But
mm.
how do you know what's unique to you, and how do you then
Yeah.
create value in the
Yeah.
world?
Yeah.
And a good, strong leader, I mean, there's so many textbooks out there, there's so many programs, but it is about having strong boundaries.
I
It is
agree.
about understanding your own values, but
Yeah.
incorporating that for your team, and then for
Mm,
your organization, and for your stakeholders, and for your clients. And for women, a lot of women like being strategic in their value. It's
yeah.
it's very
Yeah.
much, women leaders are very nurturing, they're great people leaders, they're very empathetic, but are they strategic? Do they have that business acumen there? And
Yeah.
even this word empathetic, it's so interesting how words are used. I heard it so much last year. Be empathetic. We must be empathetic. Suddenly, we're going back to, well, the new normal. We still need to
Which,
be empathetic. We've sort of lost that, ability, that compassion. Uh, but it's at the end of the day, with any relationship, you need trust. You
yeah.
have to have trust. You have to have that belief. You have to have that value.
Yeah.
And it's Robin Sharma wrote that book, Leadership Without a Title.
Yeah.
You are not a leader because of your designation. You have to
Absolutely.
lead yourself first,
Right.
and then you lead and guide and mentor your teams.
Yeah. No, that's a very interesting thing to talk about trust. And also that you make up the point you make about soft power and
Mm,
women, because that is something that keeps coming up over and over when I work with women, that
mm.
they're really good with the soft power, but the soft power is a very touchy feely,
It's a very touchy
ambiguous,
feely,
very touchy
nice.
feely,
Yeah, yeah.
right, right. And you are working, we're working in workspaces that are designed by men for men. So there is a lot of hard power demonstrated out there. And unless we can blend both,
Yes.
it's a challenge, because it's really a challenge for women to get ahead. And I really like the fact that you're talking about high value boundaries and trust,
Mm.
because a leader has to inspire trust.
Has
And
to.
if you don't have high value boundaries, which require to be very clear about, where you stand, who you are, what is
Absolutely.
needed, and if you cannot
Correct.
communicate it, you actually lose trust.
You lose trust. You do. You do. But I think at the same time, Reka, while women have to work on certain behaviors, I also feel men
Yeah.
also have to flex. And this is the
Agreed.
thing I have. It's not just the women. I think men have to
Agreed.
be aware of their biases. They have to also be aware of their boundaries. They have to be aware of how they communicate. So it's
I
a
agree.
two-way thing. It's not just the women have to show up.
No, Pearl, you make a very, very important point, because one thing I noticed with leadership and women's leadership is there's so much of burden on women to step up,
Yes. Yeah.
so much burden on women to change and, do all they're expected to develop leadership styles when they have never been groomed for it. There is no
They've
real
never
training,
been good. Absolutely. Suddenly
right?
you've been working for 15 years, and then suddenly you're expected to perform or behave just as the man does. Well, why are we not starting these set of behaviors or changes much earlier? Why is it not in colleges? Why is it not in school curriculums?
Right. And like you said, men have, even if it is at this stage, we have to have the system working with women. And that means
Absolutely.
if the majority are men, particularly at the tables of leadership or decision making or power, they have to step up. And you make a very powerful point about that. So I really like the fact that you're talking about this. But I want to
Mm,
quickly, now that we're talking about women in power and leadership, uh, I want to ask you from the perspective of corporate, what have
yeah.
you observed in terms of pain points for, with boundaries for women who are in leadership or women who are professionals who are aspiring to leadership? Where do you see them struggle with high value boundaries?
Great, great question. And, I think so many things, and I just talked about this earlier, but I'll say it again. It's communication
Mm,
in terms of not just the words, but I
yes,
think the intent and their body language and
yes,
how they show up.
mm,
And, you know, language is such an integral part of how we communicate.
it is.
So owning that space and
Yeah,
projecting your voice. And women
yeah,
also, I've noticed, we have a tendency not to be able to say no. It's we keep saying yes, 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 and saying, actually, no, I
yeah,
disagree with you.
yeah,
And why not? Why should we not challenge? And that also comes from women tend to avoid conflict. I know I do. For me, yeah, for me, I like harmony. I like engaging in dialogue, and engaging in conflict is something I never liked, but it's something I've learned to embrace.
mm,
And when we say conflict, it doesn't mean it has to be, speaking out loudly or being aggressive, but
yeah,
it's just challenging. So,
yeah,
and I think another thing, Reka, is also women tend to look for validation or approval
yeah,
externally.
yeah,
And, as they say, women don't like to toot their own trumpet. They do the work,
yeah,
they do great work, but are they showcasing it? And they're
yeah,
always looking for approval of someone else to talk about it. And that doesn't really happen these days. And, I think it's so tough. You have your work that you have to
mm,
do, but on the other
yeah,
hand, you have another task, which is showcasing that work internally. And then you've got social media where you also
yeah.
have to position yourself on LinkedIn and Insta, and oh, wow, it's suddenly so much that you have to think about and do.
Yeah. Pearl, because I work on personal branding, and you know what I
Yeah,
feel about this. Uh,
yeah,
I always ask women why not, and I'll tell you why.
absolutely. Yeah,
Because I very honestly believe that a lot of us women, because of the way we are raised, because we are taught
yes,
to
yes,
diminish, to minimize, to
diminish.
not be
Yes,
seen,
correct.
what does our need for validation say? It says that we want to be appreciated. We
We want,
want
of
to be,
course we do.
we
Of
want it,
course we do.
right?
We
But
want it.
so now the gap in my mind, what I tell women when they work on their personal brands is if you want it, articulate it. Now
But
you
again,
may
it
think,
goes back to that fear.
yes, but
How?
again, you have to look for beautiful ways to do it. Like
And you
you
have
do.
to do it in your own style. And it
Right.
has to be true to you. And you not
Exactly.
copying others or seeing what others
Yes.
are doing, but
Yes.
having your own way of portraying and being
Yes.
comfortable and being
Yes.
proud of these are my achievements.
Absolutely. I think you nailed it. It's about being proud of what you are doing, but
Absolutely. Yeah.
not, a very integral part of owning your power is saying, I did this.
Yes.
And
Yes.
saying it, you can say, I did this and I'm very proud of myself without being arrogant and boastful.
Without being arrogant. Absolutely. So, we're very comfortable and without realizing something, giving away our power. How do
Yeah.
we hold on to our power? And how do we ensure that this power is mine and it works for me? And there's nothing wrong
Absolutely.
in owning your power and holding your truth.
And the wonderful thing about having that clarity and saying, okay, when you talk about high value boundaries, you're saying, this is my value. I know my value.
Yeah.
I'm very
Yes.
proud of my value. I respect
Absolutely.
myself for the value I bring to the table, and I'm happy to talk about
Absolutely.
it. I will decide what,
Absolutely.
see, even tooting your trumpet is very relative. What I may
Yep.
be way I position myself or talk about my work may not be comfortable for somebody else. For some,
Correct.
it's different. So you get to choose and decide. And I think it's really about owning those choices from what I'm
It
getting,
is.
from where we are going in our conversation. And also the fact that let's not get into this either I'm invisible or I'm arrogant.
Correct. Yeah,
You have to
yeah.
find the middle path
You
in
have to
between.
find the middle ground, exactly, which works for you.
Right,
Absolutely.
right, great. So we're kind of getting to the end of our conversation, and
Already?
of course, yeah. Well, we can talk more if you want.
Speaking of boundaries.
See, I'm very mindful of boundaries around me. But so let's kind of say, how do we start? And I'm asking you this because, like I said, I see you approach boundaries from a space of self love and a space of aspirations for yourself about the life you want to live. It's not about, I want to do this in my career, but it's a very well rounded, balanced
Yes,
life that you're looking for yourself. So,
absolutely.
how do if somebody like me, imagine me 2 years back when I had zero boundaries first, and you had to tell me boundaries, boundaries all the time. uh, how does one start, if somebody's listening to this conversation or listens to this recording, how does one start off with setting high value boundaries?
Great question. I would say I'm going to share 5 tips.
Okay.
That is what I've done. And so one is self-awareness.
Mm.
Being self-aware of, we talked about earlier, your values, your
Yeah.
identity, and having a personal purpose,
Mm.
which works for you above and beyond the workplace, I would say.
Mm. Mm.
Second is being mindful. And what I mean
Mm.
by that is checking in with yourself, morning,
Yeah.
afternoon, evening. When someone asks you the question, how are you? We tend to
Mm.
say, oh, yeah, I'm fine, when we're not.
Yeah.
So owning your feelings, and we talked about this earlier, that the feeling sad, worry, guilt, that's okay. Sometimes we have to go through those painful emotions to
Yeah.
transform.
Yeah.
So that's one. And then I think, being mindful means today we're so busy and there's so
Yeah.
many things going on. How is our energy? Energy is
Yeah.
the number one currency at the moment.
Yeah.
How are you feeling? How is my energy
Hmm.
today?
Hmm.
So we've got self-awareness, we've got mindful. Then I would say, how do we learn to navigate through ambiguity? So how do we
Love that.
break things down,
Hmm.
simplify our life so
Hmm.
that we can be in this state of flow?
Hmm.
Life is going to continue to be crazy mad, but how
Absolutely.
do we adjust and be in that state of flow?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the fourth one is, remember, you don't owe anything to anyone except yourself.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
It's about you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Respect everyone, but you don't owe anything. And then the
Yeah.
fifth one I would say, Reka, is to own and speak your truth with calm and confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the 5 things I would say would be self-awareness, being mindful, learn to navigate through ambiguity, don't owe anyone anything, and own and speak your own truth.
Yeah. I
Those would
think
be
it's
5 starting points.
and I think it's also very important for us to say that if you have never had boundaries, if you've had zero boundaries or your boundaries have been so fluid, my personal experience, because I've been working on boundaries, is don't try and set all the boundaries at one shot.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely not. And then,
Yeah.
I think it's about experimenting. And I think, when you're setting boundaries, I would say 3 things. Have courage,
Yeah.
compassion, and a community.
Yeah.
Courage to face your fears. Yeah? Courage to say and to decide, I'm going to set my boundaries that work for me. Remember, it's your
Yeah.
internal compass. When I say compassion, while you're working through your own boundaries, reach out to others as well.
Yeah.
It's the sense of being there for others. And third, community. Like I said earlier, I wasn't able to do this by myself. I
Hmm.
had friends, I had families, I have mentors, coaches inside of work, outside of work. I have a spiritual
Yeah.
mentor.
Yeah.
So having the courage, compassion, and community
Hmm.
to help you navigate to set your
Yeah.
boundaries.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that those are very, the fact that you're talking about courage. I think 99% of the time, we don't set boundaries because we are too busy running away from fear,
Too
rather
busy
than,
running away. Yeah.
yeah, rather than just sitting there with it and saying, you know, I'm afraid, I feel afraid. Why am I feeling afraid? What is the worst
Yeah.
that can happen to me?
What is the worst that can happen? Yes.
And one of the things that worked for me personally was when I started sitting with my fear. For me, fear is, I love working with fear because it helps me. It's a friend. It's
It's
like
a
a,
friend. Exact.
yeah,
Again, and sometimes it helps, name your fear. you know,
yeah, yeah,
name
yeah,
your fear. Here comes
yeah,
John again. Oh, here we are. Oh, hello, fear.
yeah. So for me, the interesting thing was I look at fear as a tool. When the minute
Yes.
fear comes up, I'm asking myself, what is challenging me today? That means I'm being challenged. What is really challenging me
Yeah.
here?
Yeah.
And the second thing that works for me when I'm sitting with my fear is a curiosity.
Yes.
Where has
Yes.
this fear come from? Like, is this
Yeah.
even my own fear? It may not be my own fear.
It may not, a lot of the time, it may not be. It may be fear
Yes,
from external fear that you've
exactly.
just taken on board without even realizing.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah. So I'm gonna wind up with one last question, but I think of this as $1 million question for women. Okay. How do we say no with grace? Because we have spoken about baby steps. Now,
Yeah.
suppose maybe
Yeah.
somebody says, okay, tomorrow I'm going to start claiming 1 hour to hit the gym because
Yeah.
I'm setting that boundary for myself. But
Yeah.
then I have to push back people. How do I say
Yeah.
no with grace?
I think it's such a beautiful word, grace, isn't it? It just sort of flows and is so elegant.
Mhm.
It's how do we say no? Why can't we say no? It's because
Oh, nice.
we don't want to hurt other people's feelings. We don't want to disappoint them,
Yeah.
right? So we make it our problem.
Yeah.
But I would say, what is your intent when you're
Mm,
speaking to someone? Is it to help?
mm.
I'm a coach, so my intent is to help, nurture, support people. I have to
Yeah.
engage in dialogue,
Yeah.
which means there are times I have to push back. But
Mm,
again, I choose my tone. I choose the
mm,
choice of words. I
mm,
will pause. I will
mm,
reflect. I will see how the other person is responding.
mm.
And we can't control how other people feel. They may get hurt.
Agreed.
They may be disappointed, but
Yeah.
that's the way they feel.
Yeah.
But if we can learn again to focus on us and
Yeah.
set the boundaries and do things very intentionally,
Mm.
the way you communicate hopefully will respond to the other person and they will appreciate and acknowledge. And
Yeah.
we have to create a space of safety. If people feel they're not safe, they won't they won't respond. So I think, Reka, you have your Wi-Fi's gone down. So I think that's how I would say no. Is how do we say no with grace? Challenge it. Take baby steps and learn to be able to face and say no and want to say no, but in a way that's not hurtful, in a way
Yeah.
that's going to help someone.
Okay. Great. Thanks a bunch, Pearl. So
Thank you.
I think we have come to the end of our conversation now. I just want to once again say thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for unpacking boundaries for us.
It's been an
And
absolute pleasure, Reka. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity.
and we've had people weave in and out, but I'm guessing everyone's busy with their festive celebrations. So it's possible that we may have people come in later with their comments. And
Fabulous.
to everyone who's been weaving in and out, to everyone who's been there, everyone who's going to be listening to this, thank you very much. Do remember to join us next Friday. And I think next Friday we are going to be talking about, oh, yes, I have Shalini Chopra back. Shalini is an incredible DE&I champion, and she will be talking, she will be unpacking how to be politically savvy and strategic at work next week. So do join us. In the meantime, happy Dasera. May the blessings and the sacred energies of the season spill over into the rest of our year. And have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Reka. Thank you, everyone. Happy to share.